Hi, I'm Dr. Celin Gelgec.
And I'm Dr. Tori Miller.
Welcome to Breaking the Rules.
On Breaking the Rules, we talk about all things OCD.
Obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, impacts up to 1 to 2% of the population. We are here to provide not just education, but to inspire clinicians, families, and people who are impacted by OCD to be able to access the treatment they need in order to get better.
Catch us every fortnight, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello.
Celin. Hello.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Breaking the Rules.
Yes.
What are we talking about today?
Well, I think the idea of, we've talked about this a bit before, right? But, that idea of getting creative with your therapy, but more specifically, like giving yourselves permission to bring in other therapeutic modalities when it's needed.
Yes.
And to not be so rigid and to feel like because someone has OCD, they have to have ERP because it's gold standard. That is true. That is true.
Yep.
But very rarely does someone singularly present with,
Oh my God, I wish it was
just OCD.
I wish it was just OCD.
Yeah.
But it's not. More often than not, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do we mean specifically? So, because when we're talking, especially when delivering workshops or supervising and stuff, like we often talk about, especially and predominantly ACT-based principles when we're talking about exposure therapy. When we're planning, when we're talking about this episode and kind of brainstorming it a little bit, we both had to make the conscious effort to go, no.
Yeah.
We need to refer to exposure therapy separately.
Yeah. Because we both do like mindfulness-based,
ERP.
ACT-informed ERP.
Yeah, exactly. And so when really that is an added modality to your exposure therapy, a staunch exposure therapist would only do exposure and response prevention. And what does that look like? Well, what that looks like is collaborating, working together to establish a trigger list, working together to create exposure tasks and exposing yourself to those exposure tasks, but not having much else to help you manage the anxiety and the distress and the guilt or the shame or the doubt or whatever it is, whatever emotion it is that's coming up to help along the way.
Well, actually, I'm curious about that, right?
Yeah.
I know that you were back in the early days.
Yes.
You had a lot of you're working alongside practitioners who were did fairly manualized ERP.
Yes.
So I'm curious about this because I've only ever really worked in an integrated way in relation to the intersection of ACT and ERP and things.
Yep.
Mindfulness informed. So the principles of urge surfing and things, they'll come from ACT.
Yeah.
Mindfulness,
We didn't do that.
So what is taught to clients then?
Well, back then when I was working, it was
like people have been triggered and they're feeling pretty terrible. So what are they actually taught to do?
Literally.
Is it distraction?
No. Literally sit and feel the anxiety. So, and in a way where back then before inhibitory learning, the habituation model was basically, so it was we just have to sit and wait for the anxiety to come down. So we would do the exposures.
Was like breathing exercises?
None of that was taught.
Really?
Yeah. They were taught as ways of managing anxiety but not dealing with your exposure because it was deemed as it was deemed an avoidance.
So it was very much like you've just got to do it and you just got to wait for the anxiety to come down.
Yes. Yeah. Which as a young clinician, so what we would do is we'd do the exposure tasks and then we'd all come back to the group room and sit together and rate our SUDS. And just monitor them as they would come down. And for a lot of people, it didn't because what the inhibitory learning model tells us now, and it was actually starting to come out because I remember my old boss going to the International OCD conference and coming back with the inhibitory learning model.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so they had started talking about it back then.
Yeah.
And I really gravitated towards it because I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense.
Makes so much sense.
And ACT-based principles were becoming more and more talked about as well. And I could see a lot of having done the ACT training with the intro and the advanced ones with Russ Harris back then, was really, I was like, this will help so many clients. And it seems exposure friendly, like it seems ERP friendly. Why aren't we doing this? And I remember bringing it back to the team and one of my colleagues thinking it was distraction.
Yeah.
So we had to work through what being present and mindful actually was, and kind of, and then they kind of came around going, oh no, I actually see this now. And so we started introducing it along the way, and I got to help develop the program through that. But before then, it was very much rate your SUDS, watch the clock, kind of habituation, nothing. It was brutal.
So what happened then for what were the next steps for people where their SUDS didn't come down?
Repetition.
Or
we started to explore, and this wasn't wrong in a sense. I don't know if that's meant to be right or wrong, but like we would start to think, are there subtle compulsions happening? What's maintaining it? And often there were. Like there was a lot of mental avoidance and all that sort of stuff. So we did a lot of that, lots of repetition. And little bit more psychoeducation as to what that was supposed to look like in terms of making sure subtle compulsions weren't happening and so on and so forth.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So it was really like clear cut.
Yeah.
This is exposure response prevention. We did minimal cognitive work because we didn't want to give airtime to the intrusive thoughts. So there wasn't a lot of that going on. But outside of that, we did do things like, relaxation, progressive muscle, diaphragm breathing and stuff like that, but we were very clear you can't use this during an exposure task. You can use this outside of general anxiety, help you to kind of, find some level of calmness, I guess.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, like it was just OCD, intense OCD. And by the time people come into the program, it was really severe and really extreme forms of OCD. So lots of exposure, just lots of repetition, and heavy on psychoeducation stuff. But it was very much guided by the habituation model.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So in a way then, like based on sort of the traditional manualized version of ERP, I don't know that many practitioners are using it in such a pure way anymore. I think when people
not anymore.
I think when people are talking about ERP being the gold standard.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember you referencing fairly recently a meta-analysis that you read.
Yeah.
Right, where you mentioned that ERP is still considered the most effective treatment for OCD.
Yeah.
And what I'm curious about is given that most clinicians these days do tend to bring sort of ACT-based principles, we do the sort of the integrated approach.
Yeah.
Was that ERP as in like the sort of more traditional manualized approach, or was it integrated?
No. So they looked at ERP from the lens of the more traditional approach. So how I described it earlier.
Yeah.
In terms of triggers, exposures, more almost the habituation model.
Yeah.
In terms of what that actually is when they looked at all the studies. So they looked at exposure response prevention in its purest form, I guess is how I'm going to describe it.
Yep.
They looked at cognitive therapy, cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, metacognitive, inference-based cognitive, which is really kind of gaining a lot of traction now.
Yep.
And mindfulness-based therapy.
Yep.
And the ERP CBT approach was still more effective than some of the others.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that they weren't at all. They still had really good results when they did the meta-analysis. It's just not as. Interestingly, though, which is so consistent, which is why people are looking at other modalities. And I think it's why we introduce other modalities, because we know the principles of exposure response prevention. We're always looking at what's ERP friendly.
Well, yeah, because this is the question, right?
Yeah, to keep people in treatment.
I mean, why has it evolved to integrate mindfulness-based principles if the research is still very much differentiating mindfulness-based intervention from ERP? And if ERP alone as a standalone seems to get the best results, why do we bring in these other things?
Well, for me, I bring it in because it has such a high dropout rate. Like the stats will tell us it has a 62% success rate, which actually is not that high, but it's higher than the other stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
And for a psych therapy,
it's actually
pretty high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, but it has a 20% attrition rate, which is huge.
Yeah.
Right.
Which means dropout rate. People not continuing with therapy.
Exactly.
Disengaging. Yeah.
And that other bit that's left over is this is fucking hard.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying the 60 whatever percent aren't saying that. They are too. But like, exposure on its own is so hard.
Yeah.
Right? It's not impossible.
Yeah.
It's just really hard. So like for me, I'm always looking at ways to hear my client, but work in an exposure friendly way. I don't want to soften the exposures. I want to build their confidence to know that they can do the hard thing. But I'm like, how can we give them a sense of, like, how can we scaffold and build what's already there and help teach regulation strategies and all the rest of it without avoidance?
Yeah.
Because the goal of regulation is not to avoid.
No.
It's to help deal with what's going on.
I think also if we think about the context, right, as well, in terms of you were talking about a 3-week intensive hospital stay.
Yes.
With
so much support.
24/7 support.
Yep.
Not necessarily, but in a lot of instances, the position that someone is in when they have willingly entered a program like that often.
I would question willingly.
Oh, really?
I mean, it's a voluntary program.
It's a voluntary program.
But they're shit scared.
Yeah. But in terms of that reluctantly willing,
yes.
sometimes you have a level of engagement that can be a little bit higher than what you might see in the community.
Yeah.
But it's the wraparound support. So an intensive let's go exposure, I think sometimes can be a bit more effective than applying that in the community for 50 minutes a week or maybe a fortnight or maybe every 3 weeks.
I've always said this to clients who've considered it as an option. I've always said, like, you are going to achieve so much because you have a lot of support and it's intense for a really short, which is why I think the Bergen 4-day treatment is so powerful too, because it's immediate feedback. It's immediate feedback that you're getting. It's almost one-on-one.
Yeah.
It's intensive. It's really not giving OCD any breathing room.
No.
So it's a wonderful approach to do for a really intense, but which is why I've always struggled with it as a clinician in the community for exactly that reason, in a sense that I'm taking the lid off. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, see you later.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's like, well, I'm floundering now. What am I going to do with all this anxiety you've just brought up? Yeah, that's right.
Without the coaching and the scaffolding.
Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So you're right. So I think whether we've brought that in, you know, we've integrated ACT in order to provide more scaffolding for clients who are trying to do it at home on their own. Yeah. Because as much as we can see a client every week, which is considered fairly intense therapy to be going to your therapist weekly.
It's a luxury.
It's still only an hour out of your entire week. It's actually it's not that much time.
No.
And so whether we're doing it to provide general scaffolding or whether it helps people to stay more engaged, whether it actually whether it helps with retention rates, you know, it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I also think that integrating ACT-based principles and mindfulness-based principles is also, I might correct me if I'm wrong.
No. I don't think there is a right or wrong. Yeah, go on.
But is a direct response to us thinking about OCD through the lens of the inhibitory learning model.
Yes.
Whereas I think that traditional ERP speaks directly to habituation.
Yes, I agree with you.
Like that makes sense that you would address it with just pure hardcore exposure if your expectation was
anxiety drops.
The anxiety will drop. You just have to stay in it over and over again and the anxiety will go away.
Yes.
But I think that if we're looking at anxiety that may not habituate, a brain that will not forget, a brain that escalates, you know, in response. Because
some brains don't.
That's right. Then I think that's where we need the acceptance principles to help people to continue to live their lives rather than stay stuck going, well, I can't live my life because my anxiety's not coming down.
Yeah. Or they're just waiting for that and therefore not even focusing on the exposure in the first instance because they're so preoccupied with their anxiety not coming down. The end I was coming to was our best friend, Jonathan Abramowitz, who, you know, pioneered a lot of the inhibitory learning stuff and kind of helped develop the research with that with his colleagues, will also say, you know, I wish I could chuck out a lot of my earlier books because
I know. Didn't he say that in one of our early interviews with him where he said, I can't believe that my early edition is still for sale on shelves.
Yes.
I wish I could recall it.
Yeah, and just chuck them all in the bin. Don't do it. Please get the other editions. Because he has he too agrees that the value of adding a lot of the mindfulness-based principles through ACT are very ERP friendly. Because what we're asking people to do is, like, you know, mindfulness has got such a bad rap, like in terms of it being this buzzword and all the rest of it. And clients like, I've tried this before or whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't help me relax. It's like, oh, well, guess what? That's not what it's for.
Hate to break it to you, that's not what it's for. It's really just to notice your experience. So if I'm noticing that I'm anxious, that's exposure.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm urge surfing, I'm doing response prevention.
Yeah.
If I'm noticing my thoughts and thinking I'm having the thought that I'm going to stab my mom, that's diffusion.
Yeah.
But that's also an exposure. Yeah. Right?
If I'm making a values-based interaction to proceed with this outing despite my brain telling me that it's dangerous and my emotions being very elevated and I'm getting strong urges to avoid, if I proceed with that outing anyway,
that's response prevention.
That's response prevention.
Yes. Yeah. So we are doing exposure and response prevention. Yeah. So I think there are strategies, though, within those modalities that I don't think are ERP friendly. Like, so you want to have a think about what is exposure and response prevention telling us is necessary. We need exposure. We don't want to avoid. No. We don't want to neutralize or whatever it is, right? We want response prevention. So we want to not engage in compulsions. We want to do things in a messy way and so on and so forth. So we know the principles of lean into exposure, resist rituals and compulsions. Out of these modalities, which techniques are going to help us do that? Yeah. And if it's helping you do that even more, and if it seems more palatable to your client, why the fuck wouldn't you let them do it?
That's right. I mean, I know I've said this to you before, but I have pivoted away from ERP for a handful of clients where it has felt like we've ended up in this battle over building and sort of attending to a fucking hierarchy or exposure menu. Yeah. Because, you know, there's so many reasons why, right? So many reasons why they didn't want to engage. It won't work. My OCD is special. Yes. It's not effective.
No one understands it.
No one understands. The terror's too great. I don't want to feel that way. I've tried this before. Yes. It doesn't help. All of these things, right? Yeah. You know, I'm exhausted. I'm sick of homework. I don't want to do it. Yeah. It's not fair that other people don't have to do this and I do. Yeah. A raft of reasons, right? Yeah. Doesn't matter. But I thought, what is this for? Like, we're in this battle, this thing is playing out, you know, like we've drawn a line in the sand and it's like, you need ERP. Well, I don't want to do ERP. And anyway, I've pivoted to actually ACT, saying, fuck the hierarchy, fuck the exposure menu. Yeah.
What are your goals?
You're miserable. Yeah. What are your goals? What do you want to do? Yeah. What do you want to do? Yeah. You know,
what's important to you as a person?
It's like, well, I want to get back to drawing. I want to start running again. I want to be able to go out and see my friends. I want to be able to wear the jewelry that my mum gave me for my birthday. You know, it's like, okay.
But actually that jewelry is contaminated.
Yeah.
So what do I do now?
Yeah.
Well, do you see where we're going, people?
Yeah. So then it's like, well, let's make a value-based choice. Let's not let OCD hold you back. Yeah. Let's do the things that you want. Let's take your life back. Yes. And ultimately, it ends up, because it's still through the lens of ERP, it's still through the lens of understanding what OCD is, how it's operating, what's happening in the brain and in the body. Yes. Which means that we can sort of encourage people to to sort of use exercises like the life compass and values-based decision making and the choice point exercise and diffusion and all of these sorts of things and observation of thought.
Yep.
But then at the end of the day, what I tend to find is that clients are then able to say, I choose life.
Yes.
And then inadvertently they are exposing themselves and they're doing and they are doing responsive prevention.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just in a
more palatable way.
Yeah, that's right.
Something that feels approachable for them.
Yeah.
In a way that, because what you're doing is you're holding those exposure principles in mind and you're like, this is what's guiding me in my intervention as a clinician. And what am I bringing in because I'm hearing my client, I'm meeting where they're at, and what am I bringing in to help them achieve a shared goal, which is for them to get their life back, right? And OCD is getting in the way of that, but how can we use these strategies in a way that's going to still do exposure response prevention, but in a more palatable way for the client? Because the client's like, I'm done with ERP. It's like, well, we're still actually doing ERP.
Yeah, that's right.
But they don't, and so I always call it, as parents, when parents try to like blend a bunch of vegetables in the bolognese sauce because their kid will just eat spag bowl.
Yeah.
But you're like, I'm going to get you to eat veggies and this is how you're going to eat your veggies. And so you're giving your client what they want, but also what they need at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's evidence for it. ACT is, still quite effective. And bringing those modalities in and weaving them in there is really important. And it's not just ACT-based stuff, like the inference-based cognitive therapy. So ICBT can be really can be helpful for some people. Interestingly, when looking at the meta-analysis and looking at the acceptability of treatment, the numbers were reversed.
Yeah.
So you had cognitive CBT and ERP down the bottom in terms of acceptability from clients.
Which doesn't surprise any of us, I'm sure.
And the other modalities sitting a bit higher up.
Yeah.
So it's definitely much more palatable, I guess, from that perspective. Because we're asking people to do really hard things.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Yeah. So I also am a lover of schema therapy.
Yeah.
In terms of especially I get asked a lot which techniques would be most helpful. Sometimes I use chair work to put OCD on the chair.
Yeah. Interesting.
Which can be really powerful. Especially when there's punitive parent stuff going on. And I really love imagery rescripting when there's trauma involved too. So I use a lot of schema therapy techniques and weave it in with my exposure therapy strategies. And a lot of schema can feel like ERP itself just by virtue of opening up to those conversations, especially when there's trauma involved or attachment going on, that sort of stuff too. And there's a lot of evidence, especially for imagery rescripting in OCD, that has been really effective as well, which has been really lovely to see. So that for me is another one that I bring in.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I sit.
Yeah.
And DBT as well. A lot of especially a lot of the mindfulness-based self strategies from DBT I often find. I really love the chain analysis handout. Which looks at going back over massive triggers that happen and kind of working backwards, going what were the links in the chain here that kind of led to this really intense fallout, I guess.
Yep.
And then what can we do different at each level?
Yeah.
At each step.
Yeah, I use a lot of DBT too, which makes sense given, the mindfulness connection with ERP.
Yeah.
I also
and the distress tolerance skills.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of systemic work.
Yes.
Goes
without say.
Using sort of broader relational theory as well.
Yeah.
And then I'm quite informed by sort of object relations theory and things like that.
Yeah.
So they are not specific treatments for OCD per se.
Yes.
But about perhaps attending to barriers to treatment or co-occurring difficulties, things that may be perpetuating or maybe underpinning sort of some of the difficulties.
Yeah. A lot of clinicians that are trained in EMDR especially
Yeah.
like to bring a lot of that in.
That is true.
For co-occurring conditions
Yeah.
to help. And I'm not trained in EMDR, but I have some colleagues who are. So I'll usually refer on to work through that, and then they'll come back for ongoing work.
Yeah.
And that's been helpful too.
Yeah.
Yeah, not exactly for OCD specifically, but there might be some beliefs that get stuck or underlying co-occurring conditions that can kind of help shift.
Yeah.
Or when it comes to dealing with OCD.
Yeah. But I think in those instances, we're not talking specifically about the treatment of OCD, but about that sort of more creative, broader type work.
Yeah.
But I think, that comes down to formulation and thinking about where you might pause specific exposure-based work to attend to some of those broader challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
So, in the interest of, bringing in some of those different modalities, there's a wealth of evidence for each one of these things.
Yeah. Yep.
Even with OCD. And so we're still looking at use exposure response prevention as your guide.
Absolutely. That's the heart of the work.
Yeah.
Everything sort of is centered around that.
Yeah. And then have a look at other skills you might have in your wheelhouse, in your toolbox as a clinician to go, okay, this is what I know we need to achieve. These are the goals the client has. Out of these strategies, like what's ERP friendly? What's going to make sure that we're not avoiding exposure, that we're not providing reassurance, that we're not feeding the OCD cycle, that we are following response prevention.
Yep.
Which techniques is going to help us do that even more.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, that's right.
I reckon.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And I think I think that I also think about is, I suppose, that idea of, especially when there are co-occurring difficulties, is thinking about, this is probably a little bit further into treatment, but there'll be days where you're not really talking about OCD.
Yeah.
You are working with the person who happens to also have OCD. And it might be that those are the days where you're bringing in some of those broader things where actually it's like it's okay to shelve some of that stuff.
Especially when I often find, I don't know about you, but I often find we might start off with OCD and we work through psychoed and all that sort of stuff, and we're getting through some exposures and stuff. And as life starts to get bigger and bigger, because OCD shrinks people's world, right? And OCD goes from this and it kind of gets smaller and smaller. And then as their world starts to expand again and you start to see your client come back again, out of the doubt cycle and the loop of OCD, the underlying stuff that are driving OCD start to surface. And that's when you're like, this is the work. Yeah. This is
that's when we're sort of bringing in more things and you're stepping away from just exposure and just that sort of more sort of rigid or sort of formulaic kind of work. And you're like, okay, let's get our hands dirty.
Yeah.
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 Great.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Now we're here. Welcome to therapy. And again, I don't want to discount the OCD work because it is hard and it is challenging and it's hard to shift that. And sometimes those underlying the things that are driving OCD are really well entrenched.
Okay, so we've talked about why there's a time and place for sort of the more traditional, manualized ERP.
Yep.
And certainly I don't want people to be scared of doing that.
No.
There are certainly plenty of psychologists who even in private practice with their clients just no, this is the way you do it. Hard and fast. Let's go.
Yes.
But we've also talked about why so many clinicians choose to integrate some of the mindfulness-based principles ACT.
Yep.
And then how we can then also bring in things like schema therapy, DBT specifically for OCD, but then also don't forget about stepping out of that for co-occurring underlying difficulties as well. So we're starting here and then we're sort of branching out, getting wider and wider.
Yep.
And it's just what we just want to avoid is a hodgepodge of bringing in things because we're anxious as practitioners and we're just quickly downloading worksheets and activities for people to do. Make sure 100%. It's formulation driven.
Yes.
Evidence-based really thought out. Sit with each section for a while. Don't panic.
Yes. And actually give it a go.
And give it a go.
Because what you don't want, just kind of stemming off on what you were saying, is not reacting to the anxiety and not getting pulled into, whether it's from family or your client or partners or whoever else might be involved, or GPs, not seeing results fast enough. Like, it's like, dude, what do you think this is?
Yeah.
Like, so it's up to us to kind of slow things down, gather all of that information, formulate, etc., but also actually give the therapies a go.
Agreed.
Because it needs time. It needs time to change. Think about how long your client has had OCD for, how repetitive OCD is, which means how well entrenched that behavior is.
Reinforced.
And reinforced those thoughts are.
So many
So
times
it's
a day.
not going to undo in 2 sessions. I mean, the research in itself tells us we need on average 18 to 20 sessions of exposure therapy for any effective change. And that's in the most textbook case. That doesn't really include a lot of co-occurring and complexity.
Yeah, that's right.
Conditions and complexity. So just have a think about what that means. So try not to feel like we need to react to that and then chop and change techniques in order to. Sometimes we actually need to hold.
Yeah.
Right? Because we need to be grounded.
Yeah.
And the anchor to model that to our clients so they can then learn to do it for themselves. But sometimes we do need to shift gears as well. So I think it's just really, and if you're not sure when, seek supervision.
Agreed.
Or talk to a colleague, etc. But sometimes it's really that balance and just being flexible, knowing when to hold and knowing when to shift. Yeah.
Sounds a bit like practice what we preach.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Oh my goodness. Yes.
It's a life skill.
It is a life skill. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. This has been good. Thanks, Celin.
Hope it was helpful. Thank you guys so much. We'll catch you next time.